Hi, this is Kim from Emerging Creatively Tutorials, and this is ECT TV, episode 86. So, today I am going to be teaching you how to make spiral earrings. It's super fun, and once you know how to do it, you can use it in many different ways. So, let's get to the tutorial. These are the tools and materials you'll need for these earrings. So, I'm going to be using 16 gauge wire, mostly because that's the thickest wire I actually have on hand right now. Be careful with your wire being too heavy. You need to consider that when you're making earrings, because we don't want your earrings to be pulling your ears down. And then you'll need a pair of earring wires, of course, because we're making earrings. You can make your own or purchase them. I made my own. I have a tutorial on how to make your own that I will link to below this video. And then the tools you'll need are round nose pliers, chain nose pliers, wire cutters, and you'll want a steel block or an anvil, whatever you use to hammer on, and a hammer. I'm going to be using a chasing hammer because I want my earrings to have a flat look. So when you use a chasing hammer, it will flatten the wire and give that sort of look. If you want your wire to basically look the same, remain round and not flattened, then instead you could use a nylon, hard plastic, or rawhide mallet or hammer that hardens the wire without actually flattening the wire, so that you can harden your wire and have it kind of look the same. But if you do want to flatten it, then you want to use a chasing hammer. Before we continue, I just had a couple of notes about a couple of the tools we're using. So the round nose pliers, when you're making your spiral, we're going to be making open spirals. That means it has a little loop inside, and which I'm going to show you all that in a moment. But you want them to be the same for each earring. So in order to do that, you want to make a little mark on your round nose pliers. I'm going to link to an article that I wrote all about this. I think there's a video too. That if you aren't familiar with this little trick, but basically you just take a Sharpie, make a mark on your round nose pliers, and then just make sure to line up the wire with that mark, and that will make your loops uniform. And you want to do that for basically any project you're working on. And I just, like I said, I think I made a Sharpie for this project. It doesn't particularly matter where on your round nose pliers you make the mark, just that you follow it throughout the project. So mine's pretty close to the tip. It's right here. I'm not sure how well you can see it, because I just want it to be a small circle on the inside of my spiral, so you want it to be closer to the tip. It doesn't permanently stay on there, so you don't end up with like a bunch of different marks for different projects. It will wear off eventually, so don't worry about that. The other thing I wanted to mention was, and somebody mentioned this, I think on a comment in one of my videos, that when you're using thick wire, it's not a great idea to use your kind of fancy, expensive wire cutters. So I actually have a couple pair. This pair is not quite as nice, and when I have thick things to cut, I will use these, and I have mentioned that in some of my videos. Like if you're cutting chain or something like that, don't use the delicate ones. Now, if you only have one pair, then it's completely fine. What you want to focus on doing when you're using larger wire is make sure that you are cutting more in, not at the tip. You want to save the tip for very fine, detailed work, like when you're trying to get in somewhere tight, and for wire that's not quite as thick, that's, you know, thinner, more delicate, a different gauge. But if you kind of keep it down more toward the handle, then you won't dull it down quite as much. But just keep all that in mind. Okay, so now we can get started. So I'm going to show you this spiral and these earrings working right off my coil of wire. You could instead cut a long piece of wire and actually cut two that are exactly the same, and and have equal spirals. But this way you don't have to figure out, well, if I have this much wire, how big will my spiral be, blah blah blah. You can just kind of spiral until it's the size you want it to be. So we're gonna find the ends, and sometimes it gets a little, there we go, twist it up a little bit, and I'm actually just gonna pull this out a little bit. You don't necessarily have to do that, it's just less mess on the screen that I'm trying to show you here. And then we're going to start by making a flush cut on the end of the wire. I'm just making sure my wire end doesn't fly. Okay, so I made a flush cut, and so a flush cut is using the back of your wire cutters toward the work, so toward what you're keeping, and it just makes a nice flat cut. If you use it the other way, it makes a pinch cut, which is pointy and pokey, which you don't want. There are pliers that are called flush cutters. They actually, so you don't have to worry about which side, but from what I understand, just like regular wire cutters actually make a better flush cut. Just pay attention to which side you're using. Now I'm just going to hold this wire in my round nose pliers. So we want to line up the wire with that mark I was talking about earlier. And then the wire should be at the top of your pliers, but not poking through. So that's why I was rubbing my finger to make sure it's not poking through. And then we're going to twist with our right hand away from us, unless you're left-handed and you're doing this the opposite way. We're going to twist away from us, and then with my other hand, the hand that I have on my wire right here, I'm going to be wrapping the wire around the pliers and forming a loop. So, twisting away, whoops, and keep a hold of everything. And then you readjust, you go as far as your wrist will allow, and then readjust. Once again, make sure you line up with that line, that mark on your pliers, and then make sure you're holding this hook you've already made so far. It's like nice up and tight in your pliers. And then complete the loop. You're twisting away again. And so it kind of looks like this, or like a P. So now I am grabbing my chain nose pliers, and we're going to hold the loop in the pliers. So I have this tail, you know, we're still attached to our coil of wire here. And so this is the main thing. The rest of basically these earrings, how you do this. So you hold this, and wire's off to the side, and then we're just going to push up. So wire's up, and then we're going to readjust. Push up, and I almost, once you kind of get into the swing of it, you almost, well, for me anyway, I'm almost almost twisting my wrist with the pliers and going around, and just kind of holding my thumb here to make sure I'm pushing the wire into the spiral, and we're making a nice tight spiral. And we're just going to keep doing this. And of course, if you prefer to do it this way, just holding this still and going up and readjusting and going up, either way is fine. So we're just going to keep doing this until this is the size that you want it. So I'm probably going to just speed up the video here so you don't have to watch me do this in real time. Okay, so the bigger your spiral gets, the harder it is to keep everything together. So even if you got into a swing of doing it really fast, you might have to slow down a little bit and just kind of take your time and make sure you keep everything nice and tight. So once this becomes the size you want it, and like I just said, the bigger it gets, the harder it is to keep it all together, but you can experiment and decide. We are going to cut the ends and you just want to leave a tail. And I grab my ruler. If you leave a tail about 1/2 inch from the spot where the wire last kind of touched the spiral, and again, we're going to make a flush cut, and so this time it's, you know, it's still toward the work, but so it would be away from the spiral, so my flat side is toward what I'm cutting. Now I'm grabbing my round nose pliers again, and I'm going to make a loop here at the top, and I'm just going to use that same mark I made. I would probably make this loop at the top a little bit bigger, but for simplicity you could just use that same mark you just made and not make another mark. So just like before, I lined up the wire with the mark. The top of the wire was at the top of the pliers, twisted away. I'm readjusting, realigning that wire with the mark again, making sure this is tight up into the loop, and completing the loop. So that's what we have. If anything gets a little bit crooked, you want it all to be nice and flat, you can just use your pliers. Now, see how this is a little bit separated from the rest of the spiral. You can just fix that, and you might have a little more space in that too, by returning back to the spiral technique and kind of pushing it down against there. So that is the spiral. So now decide if you want to keep it round, kind of basically exactly how it's seen here, not changing it or flattening it all, and then using a rawhide or nylon hammer, or if you want to flatten it, which is what I'm going to do, you would use a chasing hammer. Now I'm just going to hammer this. I'm going to take the sound off because it could be really annoying, and so I just hammer the one side, hammer the other side. The more you hammer, the flatter it will get, and it will spread out. So you can decide how much. Just pay attention to what you're doing. And I also wanted to mention one other thing. You don't necessarily need to hammer this top loop. I just did. It doesn't really matter either way. So you can decide on that too. So now we just repeat the same process for the second earring, and basically what I do is I do it the same way, and then I just kind of hold it up to this earring to make sure it's the same size before I finish up. You know, I cut the wire and make the loop and then hammer it. So then the final thing is just to add it to the earring wire. Before you add it to the earring wire, you'll want to think about your two earrings and how you want them to face. I like mine to go the same way. I like them to be identical. Some people like to do mirror images of the earrings. You can decide which way you want to do it. Honestly, no matter what people say, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you want it to be. So, I just consciously make that decision though. As long as you consciously make the decision, don't just haphazardly just whip them on there. Think about it. So I'm opening my earring wires. It's like opening up a jump ring. So I'm just holding the wire in my hand, and then I'm just taking my chain nose pliers and pulling the loop out toward me. You don't want to open it up. You want it to kind of stay a circle, but it's open. And then slide the top loop of your spiral into the earring wire, and then close. And you just want to kind of go back and forth a few times. It just hardens that up a little more, and stick it into place. So that is one earring, and then you just repeat for the second. So here we have our final earrings. I've made a second one to match the first. Like I said, I just sort of measured it against the original one, the first one I made, to see how much larger I needed to make it, then cut it, finished it, the earring wire. So, and just as a reminder, if you're watching this video in September, it is earrings every day month, and I'm having a challenge. You can buy my earring e-course and get 30 tutorials, one per day for the entire month, and it's not too late. You get access to all of the tutorials right away, and after the class is over, after September is over too, I will be closing registration for earrings e-course soon. So if you're watching this video when it came out, then you might want to hop on that right away. The link will be below the video. Earrings every day month, you don't have to buy the e-course to participate in. You just simply make a pair of earrings every day for the month, and you can jump in. I encourage you to jump in whenever you want, and just make a pair of earrings every day for the rest of the month. I do have prizes for those who participate and share photos, and you can get all the details at the link below this video.